welcome to today's webcast hosted by the Sales Management Association. Our session will start in just a few moments. First, some very brief announcements. Please note that we will not open attendees' audio or video lines during our presentation today. However, we do welcome your questions and comments, and you may submit these in one of two ways. You can add them to the discussion window below the video display, or you can email them to us at support@salesmanagement.org. We'll remind you of that email address later in the session. Also, as an additional reminder, please note that today's session will be recorded and will be made available for playback in the Sales Management Association's resource library. Our members will also be able to download slides from the resource library as well. Our session today is one in a series of web-based Sales Management Association presentations that feature practitioners and thought leaders in the field of Salesforce effectiveness. The Sales Management Association is a professional association for practitioners in sales operations, sales enablement, sales leadership, and other professions supporting sales effectiveness in their firms. We provide our members with research, case studies, training, peer networking, and professional development. If you're joining us for the first time, we encourage you to take a look around on our site and consider membership in the association. We'd also like you to consider participating in a special event that will take place immediately following our prepared presentation today. It is a networking and discussion event which will feature anyone who's watching us live can jump into this session. You would have received an email earlier today encouraging you to register. And for those of you who did indicate that you'd like to participate, you should at this time now have an additional email in your inbox with instructions to click a special link. Now, we expect that networking event to get started 40 minutes after the hour. So just before that time, you'll want to click that link, look for the email in your inbox, click the link, and you'll have just a minute or two to indicate any special interest that you have. And then we'll match you with others who are similarly interested in networking. We think this is a great way to discuss the topic that we would have spent the past 30 minutes or so considering in this webcast. And also, it's a great opportunity to meet other peer practitioners. So we hope you take advantage of that. Okay, so without further ado, I'll start our session today. I'd like to do that by introducing two excellent presenters who will be with us today, Ken Kramer and Liam Costello from eSpatial. Ken Kramer is Vice President, North America at eSpatial, a provider of cloud-based mapping software that lets users easily upload, visualize, and analyze multiple layers of data. Previously, Ken was Senior Vice President, Product Strategy and Enablement at Map Anything and President at Teraline. Ken, it's always great to have you with us. Let me welcome you to the screen. How are you? Welcome.
Hi, Bob, and everybody. Thanks for having me.
Great. Ken is joined by his colleague, Liam Costello. Liam Costello is a mapping expert at eSpatial. He specializes in helping eSpatial's clients utilize mapping visualizations and data to improve territory management, route optimization, and other challenges. Welcome, Liam Costello. Nice to have you back with us.
Hi, guys. Happy to be here.
Great. Well, gentlemen, thank you. I'll turn the floor over to you and look forward to your thoughts on this topic, and then we'll pick it back up in Q&A in just a little while.
Sounds good.
Perfect. Thanks, Bob.
All righty. So Bob had asked us to talk a little bit about territory splits. I can only imagine that this is, well, it's a relatively narrow topic. It's one that probably created a lot of angst in his life as a practitioner and a consultant back in the day. Today, we are going to cover some of the basics. What is a territory split or change? Why you should split a territory and the measures that would drive those particular changes. Liam will, I'll cover this first half and set things up, and then Liam will run through some best practices. So hopefully you have a few tips that you can take home and put into practice for you. And we'll wrap it up and get into the networking as Bob had mentioned. So within the broader context of territory realignment process, which as many of you know, we're coming into the season now for many companies where territory realignment is at the top of the agenda as we're coming in towards Q4 and people are getting ready for new calendar years, potentially new selling years in January. So realignment process could involve many different type of things, tweaks and changes, complete total realignment, adding sales reps to the team, possibly reducing sales reps. But within the realm of a split, we'll simply talk about it in the context of dividing an existing territory, which could be a geographic region and or a set of accounts, into 2 or more territories. In the simplest form, we'd look at taking one territory and splitting it in half. You have an existing rep that would get half and another rep that would get the other half. It's kind of the basics of what a split is. So as you can see here in this graphic, we had 2 territories we're depicting. We looked at territory 2 or rep 2 in the orange, and we simply split that in half and created the new hire in purple. So rep 1's territory didn't change at all. Rep 2's territory got split roughly in half. In this next example, to give you a few other surrounding or tangential type of changes that happen to territories, we often talk about dissolving a territory. And again, this is in its very simplest form. Normally, I would see one territory get dissolved potentially into 3 or 4 surrounding territories, not necessarily going through a reoptimization, but just simply temporarily reassigning the geography and the accounts from one territory into those surrounding ones. In this case, our picture puts it in the simplest form. We had 2 territories. We dissolved one into the other, so territory 2 is no longer in existence. Let's look at this next slide. I believe this would be more of a reoptimization or a realignment. So same geography being covered in all of these. Rep 1 doesn't necessarily stay the same in this case as it did in our first example of the split. This is something where we looked at the whole and said, we want to go from 2 reps to 3 reps. What's the best way to do this? This is what's the optimal approach so that all 3 territories end up having equitable workload or opportunity in them, regardless of the change that the disruption that may come from that realignment process. So in this case, all of the territories changed, both territory 1, territory 2, both changed, and then a third one was added based upon some of the geography from the others. So why should you split a territory? There's a lot of different reasons, and many of these reasons exist from a why would you change a territory as well, other just generic realignment efforts. The biggest thing I can think of is from a growth perspective, companies are looking at doing more revenue. And obviously, we feel as though you can increase the amount of revenue with optimal territories to maximize everybody's capacity. But at some point in time, every rep's capacity will be maximized. And to be able to get incremental revenues beyond that, you need incremental reps. So when you're dealing with a fixed geography, the only way to add more reps and potentially increase sales is to split a territory with the goal that 2 reps working one geographic area will produce more than one of them did. Other reasons, there could be more temporary in nature as opposed to longer term. But if somebody is on leave, whether it be maternity, health reasons, otherwise, a sabbatical, any other particular isolated need that requires somebody to fill in perhaps or create an additional territory out of an existing space. So a rep could approach you and say, I'd love to stay with the company. I'd like to be part-time. And the company might look at things and say, oh, okay, you've been here 5-10 years, you're a good solid rep. But in order to do that, we need to split the territory in half and then have somebody else come in and potentially at that part-time basis as well to cover that additional area. Losing market share is an indicator on why you might be looking at these splits. If you have a geographic area being covered by rep and one rep and your core competitor has 2 reps in that same area, in all likelihood, they have a higher market share than you. And it's an indicator that there's opportunity out there, but you're losing it. Therefore, if we have increased coverage, as we talked about, putting 2 reps in the same geographic area, then you have a better opportunity to increase your market share, compete better against your competition. So this already starts to get into the benefits. It gives you better coverage. In many cases, anytime you realign a territory and you shrink a rep's territory, the first gut reaction is, they're upset because they're losing potential area where they can sell into. But tenured reps, experienced reps, smart reps recognize they can do a better job in a smaller geography. They can see more accounts in less time. They can spend more time with those accounts. They can grow those accounts better because of that, better relationships, so that they recognize I'm now using my time better, driving less because I have a smaller geography to cover. So there's definitely some benefits to that, both from an expense side on a drive time expense, as we just experienced this past summer with the cost of fuel and the increase on the reimbursement rate. Those are things that CFOs looked at, and over the past couple of years with COVID, CFOs were appreciating that we weren't driving as much, but as everybody starts getting back out again, people look at the expense side of things as well. So shorter drive times could decrease some of those expenses, but also on the upside is it's more face time with customers as opposed to lost time in the car. So go back one. So some of the measures that would drive the desire, the request to change a territory. You'll hear, you've probably heard me on past webinars, and I started to allude to it here, but by and large, optimizing your territories, leveraging resources as much as you can. It comes down to a capacity problem. You're attempting to maximize the utilization of every rep, get the fullest possible use of the capacity of each possible rep and every possible rep that you have. So when you're looking at workload, you can, again, increase the amount of time with customers by decreasing the travel time. So if you look at an existing territory and recognize if you're going to service it properly, the rep is working 60 or 80 hours a week, well, then it's certainly time to look at that, at doing a split and or a realignment of sorts. Again, the potential side of things, if a rep is servicing, $1 million, what they view as $1 million territory, but you were to bring in 2 reps into that, in all likelihood, they might not each bring in $1 million, but they could each bring in more than $500,000. So you'd be increasing the overall revenue that a company is able to bring in. And then obviously you're looking at, the number of accounts that they can possibly service. So when a rep is getting overloaded and they can't possibly manage, 400 accounts, and do that properly, that's obviously an indicator that there's demand out there, but there's not enough capacity or resources to service it. So those would trigger a change. If you peeked ahead a little lower on my slide, I already alluded a little bit to the example that I teed up with taking $1 million territory, splitting it in half, and hopefully turning it into $1.5 million territory, but with 2 reps perhaps that are doing it. Yes, the revenue per rep might be higher, but the cost per sale will decrease and your market share will increase. So from an organizational perspective, this can be critical as you're competing out there for market share. There are only, in most cases, only so many customers you can possibly sell to. And if your competition is putting more resources out there than you need to start being smarter and start catching up and putting the appropriate amount of resources. All right. Some of the benefits, I think I've alluded to some of these again for the reps. Less drive time, more face time. The customers will benefit from this as well. They'll get better service. If your rep is managing 50 accounts instead of 100, they'll get more attention. Again, your CFO is going to appreciate reducing any kind of travel expenses they possibly can. The chief revenue officer is obviously going to appreciate any possibility to increase revenues across the company. Customer success officers are going to be happy if their customers are being serviced more. Then there's going to be less churn. So that'll work in your favor from a company perspective. And obviously, all of these things will lead to increased revenue, hopefully some decreased expenses, and therefore increased shareholder value. So if you're a publicly traded company or have backers who own a part of the company, they'll be happy to see you not losing market share and maximizing the revenues across the board. And from there, I'll turn it over to Liam, I believe, to cover some of the best practices.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Ken. So we have 4 best practices or kind of hints or tips that we would recommend when doing a territory change or a split or a realignment. So the first one is definitely to optimize automatically. So use an automatic optimizer. And kind of it's nearly get 2 tips in one for this one, but it's also to use a workload index, and Ken already touched on that. So I'll go through them as the first best practice. Second best practice is to conduct what if analysis and do scenario planning. Third best practice is to territory centers. And then the final one is to incorporate account exceptions. And again, Ken may chime in on the last one. He's a lot of experience around that, but they're just the 4 hints or tips that we'll go through. So I'll start with the first one, about optimizing automatically and using workload. So what I mean by optimizing automatically is that manually realigning or splitting territories is too time consuming. From experience, myself and Ken, we would have heard horror stories from our own customers that every quarter they would meet up every week and do a manual realignment for the entire organization. And that shouldn't happen. It's too time consuming. Nobody should spend a week per quarter manually realigning territory. So it's really important to use a territory management tool that allows for automatic optimization. And to also optimize your territories or automatically optimize your territories based off workload. Now, we know that the measures that drive a territory change, as Ken mentioned, workload and number of accounts and potential, but workload is what we would recommend. And it really is a strong best practice that I would encourage. Basically, a workload index is, you can see the formula that we use, but you can certainly use your own. But it is an estimation of effort for each rep or each territory. It helps maximize the workload capacity of each rep. So in our case, we incorporate frequency. So how often would a rep visit an account? The duration. So how often do they spend at each account? And then we incorporate travel time. So we look at the road network as well to gauge the windshield time. So we can just kind of see from this graph here that out of the 10 reps, there's some imbalance in terms of workload. Some reps have a higher workload capacity, some reps have a lower workload capacity. So how do we go around this to make it more optimum? So manually doing it would take too long. I know with 10 reps you might get away with it, but once you have 20, 30, 40, 50 plus reps, it becomes a nightmare. So using an automatically optimizing tool based on workload, we can get an end product or an end result like this where workload is spread evenly across your reps. So that brings it close to the first best practice. The second best practice is just a one slider. It's to conduct what if analysis. So scenario planning is key. We know that, we get that. But using an automatic optimizer to manually realign or split your territories, it's only, well, it's a best practice, but it's a recommendation tool as well. It might get you 95, 98% of the way there. Manual tweaks will always occur after the fact, or we would recommend. So in this scenario, we're doing what if analysis. The left-hand viewport is what the territories or your territory alignment look like prior to running any optimization, and the right-hand side is what your current alignment looks after the optimization has taken place. So my number one tip here, when you're doing any realignment or splitting anything, is never do it based off gut feeling. A lot of the time, your gut feeling could be right by splitting 2 reps territories in half or adding in a third rep. A lot of the time it will work out. But if you're not doing any scenario planning or what if analysis, you've no real data driven back decision making. So at least if after we've done a re-optimization or a tweak, we can see what the outcome would be. So at least you can say, yeah, this makes sense, let's move forward, or no, I don't like the way this looks, let's go back to the drawing board. So always use what if analysis and do scenario planning when doing any sort of splitting or realignments. So now we'll go on to the third best practice, which is all about using territory center points. So a lot of mapping tools or territory management tools out there, a lot of them have different functionality. We would definitely recommend one that would use territory centers. And how they work is, I'll explain how they work in more detail through the next slides. I have a really simple example, but we all know that placing reps or existing reps in the right location is a good thing, and also for new hires, looking at the best place to recruit reps in new hire territories. It's a big problem that a lot of our customers have. So effectively, having reps close to their accounts, we all know, will increase sales, improve morale, reduce costs, all that good stuff that Ken mentioned. And territory center points, they can really be used as guides or advise you on the best locations to place an existing rep in existing territory, or as we said, in a new hire. So we'll just go through an example here. In this scenario here, we have 2 territories, 2 reps. One territory is in Pennsylvania 1, and another territory is New Jersey 2. And we can see the accounts, this circular pins within each of the 2 territories. But we've done a realignment, we split a territory. We've added actually a third rep in the bottom right hand corner here, called in the green territory, called the new territory. So the next plan of attack will be to let's evaluate the locations of our current reps or where they should be located in Pennsylvania 1 and New Jersey 2, but also best understand where we should recruit a new hire from. And we use, as I said, territory center points, and in this case, weighted center points. So there's kind of 2 types of center points that we use. One is a geographic center point, which just plots a point at the center of each territory. Best practice, or something I would always recommend, is to use a weighted center point based off a workload. So we can see in the territory center points have now generated, they're the red dots with the kind of red halos above them. And if we go to the next slide, great example is New Jersey 2. we can see that all the accounts are at the eastern side of this rep's territory. So we can easily see that that's where eSpatial, or in this case, eSpatial is recommending where that rep should be located. And then in the new territory, we can see where the closest town or city where we should start recruiting that rep for in the new territory, which is West Windsor. So again, that would be the third best practice that we would recommend, is to incorporate territory center points, but weighted center points. And the final one is to allow for account exceptions. So we all know that the geography of territories change, account ownerships change. We get that. And I suppose the previous best practice that we went through were very much data driven, logic based. They didn't really cater for the emotional impact or the human impact for when doing any splits or changing or territory changes or changing accounts. So in this scenario here, the screenshot on the right hand side, we've moved territory 4 further north into Austin and Round Rock. So therefore, as a result of changing these counties and zips from one rep to another, the accounts also change. But that can also be a bad thing, because there could be strong relationships built up. Maybe the rep in Territory 6 had strong relationships with all these customers in Austin and Round Rock. There could also be key accounts. So if we look to the kind of detailed image on the left-hand side, or the zoomed in image, what we've done here is we've allowed or incorporated account exceptions. So even though all of these counts are in physically Territory 4 in this new territory, we have color coded some of the accounts differently to allow to say that even though these accounts are now in Territory 4, the owner of these accounts still belong to the old rep, the rep owner of Territory 6, because yes, they could have been key accounts or strong relationships have been built up over time. So always allow for that emotional or human factor to make manual tweaks. And yes, so to make sure the reps stay happy, but also make sure that the customers stay happy as well. And things to also consider here when incorporating account exceptions are holdbacks and rules of engagements. But holdbacks could be maybe give a timeline, maybe of an existing rep to work on any of the old accounts for a month before them accounts change ownership to the new rep. Or if there's any existing open deals, maybe give them a timeline to keep working on it, so your reps would there's no kind of conflict there between reps. And also set up rules of engagement early. So if you are doing any changing accounts, if you are moving zip codes and geographies around, that HR is involved. So collaborate with HR early on. I know Ken might want to add on to this. I'll let Ken jump in if he wants to add anything here as well.
Sure. I think you got most of it, Liam. Yeah, look, the reality is, some people like to say change is good. Other people don't always agree with that statement when it affects them, especially a sales rep when you're taking away something that they feel is theirs. I have worked I've worked with lots of people in sales, and it's always mine, mine, mine. And I've also worked with some CEOs who like to remind them, they're all mine. I'm letting you borrow them. And that's kind of the context you need to think about, is the customers need to belong to the company. The reps are working them. Obviously, they feel ownership of those accounts. And when you change a territory, you're going to get some pushback. When you take geography and or accounts away from them, you're going to get pushback. So enter into these processes logically. It's, hey, look, the company's growing. We're going from 100 reps to 200 reps. The only way that happens is if, on average, everybody's territory gets cut in half. However, we recognize that we don't want to disrupt everything. We want you to be successful. We think there's enough opportunity for you to be successful at 200 reps, but in the incorporated transition period, as Liam mentioned, maybe there's a holdback for a month or 3 months or till the end of the quarter or the end of the year. Territories are extremely tied into an impact compensation, and in theory, that's really what the rep cares about and what you want them to care about, quite frankly. So incorporate those holdbacks into your plans as you're rolling out changes. I'd keep them as short as you think you can get away with. You want people focused appropriately, but you also want to make sure people aren't just cutting and running and dumping good opportunities. And the manager cares because the manager is going to own the whole territory, or the director, but the sales rep themselves is going to be focused on what their new territory is. So give them a reason to make sure there's a clean handoff, and give them some incentive to make sure that they close what they can as soon as they can, and then they focus on their new or current territory. From a rules and engagement perspective or reassignment, I've really only seen the HR side of things come into play a handful of times, typically in one particular industry, and and more often than not, it's when when a company could be going down in size. So they're going from 120 reps down to 100 reps, and there's going to be layoffs, and that's where they need to be very careful. So some of those rules of engagement could be, when you do a realignment process of any sort, if one rep lives in the territory, then that territory is that rep's. If two reps, then the one that's closest to the center, or the one that has the most tenure, or the one that's closest to an empty territory next to them that doesn't have any reps. Anything you can do to systematize the process, the cleaner it will be. And this is where, software solutions will help mathematically give you the best solution. But yeah, there's a human element that comes into play. Local knowledge comes into play. Any kind of change, whether it be upsizing, downsizing, realignment of any sort, the more buy-in you have from the field managers, the more they can work with the reps who are more directly impacted by the change. Right.
Perfect. Thanks, Ken.
You're welcome.
Yeah, just some testimonials of how our customers are using or finding eSpatial. I don't expect you to read all of these. I just wanted to point out we have a lot of case studies and success stories on our website, so feel free to read more about them if you wanted to. And yeah, we're happy to open the floor to any questions. You can see our contact information there. And also just to note, myself, Ken, and a few other members of the team will be at Dreamforce later this month. We're at booth 1604. So if you're at Dreamforce, we'd be more than happy to speak with you and connect and answer any questions.
Meet in person again.
Yeah. So that's us done, and happy to answer any questions or go back to Bob.
Yeah, thank you. We do have a couple of questions. I'll tee those up now, and then we'll go for just a couple of minutes here, and then we can begin our networking. But the first question is about criteria for splitting territories. Here, let me put it on the screen. The questioner asks, what criteria do you recommend for use in splitting territories, revenue, headcount, or other factors?
The factors, yeah. So again, my default in most cases is going to be capacity driven. So that's related to headcount, but it's also related to workload, as Liam talked about in depthly. And again, in most cases, we'll recommend, if a workload attribute is available, use that to design your territories, and then use that, once that workload is well beyond 40 hours a week, obviously you need to start looking at making more compact territories. So I'd be looking at anything capacity related, which would be headcount, workload, those type of things. It could be revenue as well, as I mentioned earlier, from a growth perspective. You got your board of directors and the management team saying, hey, we need to grow 20% this year. And you have a territory that has more opportunity in it, but the rep is kind of at their capacity. So my example before was, you take $1 million territory, split it into two $700,000 territories, and you got 40% growth potential there. So those are the type of things I would be looking at.
One other quick one related, but could you talk a little bit about how best to estimate workload or capacity for salespeople? Um, what are some standard approaches that you've seen work
Yeah,
well?
yeah, Liam, can you pull up your workload slide, perhaps?
Yep.
I think you kind of hit that one, but the question could have come in beforehand. Go-
I think I'm showing it now. Hopefully you
Yeah,
can see that. Oh, yeah.
I'll let you talk about it again.
Yeah. So this is our algorithm. I know some companies might want to build their own, but I suppose the workload capacity or the workload algorithm that we use requires 3 inputs. Two inputs will come from the customer. They will be the frequency and call duration. So let's say we keep it consistent at a monthly basis. So the frequency would be how often does a rep visit an account. Now there could be some logic in where there could be gold standard accounts, bronze silver standard accounts, where maybe the gold standard accounts get visited at a higher frequency than a silver and a bronze, which is fine. We can build in that logic, but I suppose if you identified that frequency, we could input that, and then the duration is on average how often does a rep spend at each of these accounts. So they would be the 2 inputs from the customer side, and then the algorithm or how our system would work. It would look at the road network and calculate the windshield time, and that's how it measures the capacity and the workload.
Got it. Thanks. So great. Well, that will wrap up our Q&A. We're right on time, so we've allocated roughly 20 minutes for networking. So we'll jump into that now. But before we do, I wanted to thank you, gentlemen, for a great presentation and for sharing your time and insight with us today. Ken Kramer and Liam Costello from eSpatial. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you all. Thanks, Bob, for having us, and thank everybody for spending some time with us today.
Now, Ken and Liam, will you be able to join us for this networking and discussion?
Happy to.
Yep, definitely.
I want to show you how it will work. So, if you've already registered or expressed interest in participating, we have added you to the networking platform, and you will have already received an email with instructions. Really, it's just a link that you click. You can click that now and head over to the meeting platform. What will happen is you'll be asked to indicate some interest in a few topic areas related to territory management, and then we'll match you with someone else based on those interests for a very brief, actually no more than 5-minute conversation. And time permitting, we'll try to do 3 rounds of these speed meetings. And in the meeting, their purpose really is to maybe share some insights or reaction about today's content. Alternately, you may use one of
Sales Management Association members. Please allow me 60 seconds to explain some useful logistics. First,
I can see one of our panelists is already listening to the intro video, so I'm going to mute them. But alternately, you can use one of the 2 discussion topic questions that I've put here, or you can simply use the time to interact with a new person in your peer network. And so we encourage you to do that. So we're going to sign off now from the webcast. I'll leave this slide up for everyone's benefit, and then we will see you over on the networking platform in just about 1 minute. So thank you, everyone.